Yo, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be getting the Cherokee running. This is the $1,000 XJ that had coolant in the oil, and we got a brand new clear water cylinder head to put on this thing. We also got new lifters, push rods, gaskets, head bolts, a lot of new parts, spark plugs. Let's check it out. If you've been keeping up with the project, you know it's a 2000 Cherokee and it has the 331 head, which are pretty notorious for cracking. And I'd be willing to bet that this one's cracked. For one, there wasn't any oil in the coolant, which would signify a cracked block. And the previous owner already put 2 head gaskets on it, and it still had coolant in the oil. I know I told you guys I get this thing Magnaflux, but the machine shop I wanted to use was a few weeks out with the work, so I said forget about it. And I put all my money on it's cracked and bought a brand new head. Now these aren't very cheap. So another option I looked into was getting an 02 and up 4-liter head. It's still a 331 casting, but it's revised and it's the TUPY heads, and they still have the mounting provisions for the coil rail. Now 99 and earlier heads, they're plenty strong, but they don't have the mounting location like that. I got new lifters because the lifter valley here was gunked up with a bunch of crap and it didn't look good. And if you remember, one of the lifters was actually in pieces. The retaining clip actually came out and the lifter was all separated. Last night I spent a good amount of time getting everything cleaned up and getting the mating surface cleaned up for the cylinder head. And that involved a lot of brake clean and degreaser and purple power and these scuff pads and a little brush attachment for the vacuum. And we got it cleaned up pretty good. So we're gonna start out by switching out all the lifters and then we'll get this thing assembled. Getting the old lifters out is pretty simple. Just using a big magnet. Going fishing, wiggle them a little, and out it comes. Let's get these new lifters installed. Make sure when they come out of the packaging, you spray them with brake clean or mineral spirits just to get all that shipping oil off of there. Once they're clean and dry, they're ready to install. Now, I'm not one to tell you what to do, all right? This is just how I do it. This is why I tend to stay off the forums, because everybody's right, everybody's wrong, whatever. So, here's what I do. Lifter. I'm going to coat it with oil, and then in this oil can I just have Valvoline VR1 racing oil. It's got a lot of zinc in it, just like that. And then where the lifter meets the cam right here on the face, use some assembly lube. This is Permatex Ultra Slick, and just put some assembly lube right there on the face like that. Smear it in. I made sure to wipe off the magnet so it was nice and clean. We'll put it on the magnet like that, and then we'll just drop it right into the lifter bore like that. That's all there is to it. And like I said, these came right out of the package and I cleaned them off. Didn't have them soaking in oil overnight or nothing like that. Get a good coating of oil, assembly lube on the face, and into the lifter bore. All the new lifters are in, looking good. Now we'll come over here. The head is actually now ready to put on, but we got to do a couple things. This thing's pretty bare. We need to transfer a few things from the old head onto the new one, like the exhaust manifold studs here, this ground stud, and then the thermostat housing, but I think I'll do that later because that's easy to do. The studs here are an E8 Torx, and man, this E-Torx set has really come in handy with Jeeps. This is the 3rd time now. I thought I'd never use these things, but the bell housing bolts on the XJ, I did a YJ starter that needed them. Hope that fits. Oh yeah. Anyway, just the grounding stud over here. That should do it. Tighten that up. And then usually, you know, with these Jeep heads, I'll just hock them in there and, you know, make a mess and whatever. But since it's so new and shiny and nice, I think I'm going to use the engine hoist to just kind of set her down in there nicely. Get everything lined up. First, we need to lay our new head gasket on here. Don't put it on upside down. Some of them are marked up, but the front will have 2 holes here and the back only has 1. That's a good way to know. I also need to mention, since I didn't show you guys when I clean this surface off, make sure you come through to each of these head bolt holes and blow it out with compressed air. That way, you know, the bolt doesn't force hydraulic pressure and crack your block. That would suck, but I already did that. Let's get the head hooked up to this unit. That actually popped right into place. That was real nice using that engine hoist. Now here's why this bolt can't get it in, because of the lip on the firewall here. And I've done it a time or two where couldn't get it on. We're ready for head bolt. Couple of notes. You'll have 3 different kinds. The ones with threads on the top go outside the valve cover, so this whole row. And then the flat top ones go inside the valve cover. And then the ones with these studs on them, again, ask me how I know. Make sure you get them in the right spot, because they have a stud sticking out for the valve cover gasket. which slips over like that. So it's the second one from the front and the second one from the back. And then one more thing to note, this here front right bolt needs thread sealer on it because there's a cooling passage right underneath. So we'll get all these started hand tight and then we'll torque them to spec. Got all of them hand tight, now we're ready to torque it down. We have to torque them 3 different times, and then there's also a torque pattern. We're gonna start here and then do like a spiral or a swirl, cinnamon roll, whatever. So the first spec is 22 foot-pounds. Now believe me, I was tempted to put this nice brand new head on my personal XJ, the one I drive every day. But then I was thinking, what if we do all this work and the problem still persists? So just for peace of mind, if we continue to have problems after all this, we'll know for sure it wasn't the head. Now we'll bring her up to 45 foot-pounds, do the same exact thing. Final spec is 110, with the exception of the one we put thread sealant on, that only gets 100 foot-pounds. Then back her down to 100. That did not just... Oh no. Well, you seen it here. Let me pull all this back off. Hopefully there's some thread sticking out. Suddenly I have trust issues with my torque wrench. Luckily there is some sticking out. I really hope we can get a bite on this thing and get it out. Oh, thank God. All right, I'm gonna go get a new torque wrench. All right, back from the harbor. Got the same one actually. That one is like 6 years old, so it could be its time. I'm gonna get the head back on and just kind of get to the same spot we were already at, and then we'll see what happens when we go to torque it. And for the bolt that broke off, I'm just gonna have to use one of the old ones. Not really much choice. Take 2 with the new unit. This one feels a lot more solid with the clicks. My old one there was getting kind of vague. And now for the one that broke last time. Woo! Now I gotta put a shallow socket on the back one here. Not much bite on the square drive, but it's kind of what you have to do. Let's keep rocking on the assembly here. Next I'm gonna be throwing in the push rods. I do put a little bit of assembly lube on the ends. The important thing here is just to make sure that the push rod seats in its cup, in the lifter cup. Next we'll throw on the rocker arms, and as you can see I put some assembly lube on the valve stem tips and both sides of the push rod. Got one started there, get the rest of them on. The torque spec on these is 19 foot-pounds, and it's a non-adjustable valve train, so you can just torque them right down. If it makes you feel better to spin the motor over and wait for the valves to open or close or whatever people tell you, you can do it, but rockers are good and torqued. Now what I'm gonna do is rip this old oil filter off. This thing has probably seen some nasty stuff. Slip our new one in here. Make sure that drain bolt's in. Now rather than put the valve cover on and have the oil only going into one spot, I'm actually gonna pour 4 out of our 6 quarts and just try and go along the whole thing here. Might make a mess. Got heavy duty diesel oil. I have a feeling there's gonna be a lot of oil burning off this block when we first fire it, because I spilled a bunch. All right, got it filled with the oil. I also remembered the 2 bolts on the bracket here for the compressor, and then I got the nut on back here for the grounding strap. Now we can come over here, grab our valve cover gasket, like that. And we'll take the valve cover and put this sucker on top. Get all of our hardware on here and snug her down. Got our valve cover secure on there. Now we're gonna add our other 2 quarts of oil along with some sea foam. We'll add 1 ounce of this for every quart of oil, so about 1/3 of the can we'll dump in here. Or half, that's fine. And then about 2 more quarts of our diesel oil. While we wait for that oil to settle down, we'll throw in our new spark plugs, good old Autolite 985s. Got them gapped to 35 thousandths. Get all these put in. All right, we should be good. I'm pretty excited to fire this thing up, so I'm gonna get to assembling the rest of the motor, and then we'll prime the engine and we'll fire it up, see what happens. All right, everything is put back together and we're almost ready for our first start. We need to prime this engine though, since we got new lifters in there. Come under here to the fuse box. We're gonna find the ASD relay. That's gonna cut fuel and ignition. And we should probably also reconnect the battery. And we also need to add coolant. I got the fancy funnel on here. 1 so I can keep an eye on the coolant color and see what it looks like. And 2, it'll bleed any air bubbles out of the cooling system. Apparently on these clear water heads, they have an extra hole right there. And, oh, you can't see that. I don't know if you can see it anyway. But coolant was just dumping out of that hole, so I need to find a bolt that'll fit in there. Luckily, I had one in stock. Wrapped it in tape. Get that snug down, and we'll continue. All right, that seemed to do the trick back there, and we got some coolant in there. Let's prime it. We're just gonna turn it over till it builds oil pressure. Then we'll go throw that relay back in. Oh, that's an issue. Charger on. Take 2. Keep an eye on the oil pressure up yonder. I'm gonna charge a little bit. All right, let's see what happens. All right, pop that sucker back in. We're gonna start it. I'm gonna keep it at high idle for, I'm not even kidding you, probably 30 minutes or so, and let everything get up to temp. Keep the RPMs up to try and break in the new lifters, make sure everything goes well on that end, and make sure that seafoam gets nice and hot, dissolves all the gunk, hopefully gets the remainder of the coolant out of the engine. I need to rig up a piece of wood or something that I can keep on the pedal so I don't have to be in the cab the whole time, so I can check on things up here. Gonna get the ventilation going for the exhaust and all the stuff that's gonna burn off the outside of the engine and whatnot. All right, fire it up. There we go, holding there. As suspected, stuff's burning off the engine. We'll keep an eye on our coolant level too and add to it as we need it. Oil pressure looks great, everything else looks good. Keeping that high idle. Temp's starting to come up. The oil pressure is doing things. Let's see what the oil pressure does at idle. Oh, that ain't good. Rev it up. Ah, that ain't good. So we might be dropping the pan doing an oil pump. I don't know where all the coolant went. The thermostat must have opened up. Oil pressure's dropping even though it's above 2 grand. I might have to shut her down here. Yep, I'm gonna shut her down. Looks like I'll be ordering an oil pump and we'll be dropping the oil pan. Anyway, we'll let it cool down a little bit and we'll change the oil. Hopefully it's not a milkshake and we solved that problem at least. And then if we have to do an oil pump to get it the rest of the way, that'll be all right. So it ran for more like 10 minutes, not 30. But we'll drop the oil anyway, see what it looks like. Ah, that's a milkshake. But that could be the remainder of what was left in the block and not necessarily new coolant getting mixed. So I'd be willing to do another oil change just to see. And I'd almost want to do that before I go and fix the oil pump, because if that doesn't do it, we definitely have engine issues at that point. Well, based on how milky that coolant was, I don't know that that was just from what was left in the engine. I don't think it would be that bad. I feel like we have motor issues on our hands. Like I was saying underneath, I don't think I should be replacing an oil pump if we have motor issues to put it all back together and then it still does the same thing for a 3rd time. So I might be looking for an engine, I don't know. That's about all we can do today. So that's gonna wrap it up for this one. Hope you enjoyed it, take it easy, I'll see you in the next one.